much for that. Well, let's return now to plans for an extra charge of up to 22p on bottles and cans in a new recycling deposit scheme for England. The government says it hopes it'll increase recycling and cut waste. The deposit will increase prices, but consumers will get the money back if they return the container. Well, I'm joined now by Jonathan Ivelaw-Chapman, who's Chief Executive Officer of Sedex. That's the company that works to improve standards in global supply chains. A long time coming, many people will say, but a welcome proposal.
It is very welcome, and I think it helps in terms of the way in which consumers who have driven the argument back into retailers and brands, now we can see the outcome of that. And I think my members, the retailers and brands, are very pleased to see that there's now some concrete action taking place in the UK, but also that consumers can play their part too.
Does this work? Because, as you say, consumer driven, but it's the consumers who are going to have to pay for this.
Yeah, I'd say if you follow through the scheme, and we haven't had the details for the scheme yet, but if you follow through, and I remember being in the 70s, taking my Corona bottle down for my 10 pence at the corner of the street on a Sunday to get some pocket money. If you take that all the way through, there's the opportunity there for consumers to gain from this process and take some responsibility, but I think also it helps the investment in terms of new technologies and better ways for the recycling industry, for brands and retailers, my members, to be able to invest in how they simplify their packaging and simplify their approach.
Does this sort of get them off the hook a bit? Because, as we say, yes, consumer driven, and as I say, they're carrying the cost of this, and yet those who produce the packaging, well, they don't seem to be that involved.
Yeah, I think I challenge that and say that I think my members take very seriously their responsibility in terms of how they approach the whole subject on packaging, and also the environmental issues that go with that. 'Cause it's not just about packaging, it's about transporting air to Europe or shipping air around the world and the cost involved in that. I think the business case is being made increasingly to simplify the way in which we as consumers buy products and services. Our members take very seriously the responsibility to simplify their approach.
You talk about a business case, but actually this is a much more emotional thing, isn't it? This is Blue Planet, it's certain companies' drive that has just caught the public imagination.
Yeah, I watched Blue Planet too, and you couldn't help be stuck in the conversation. It was very emotional. There is the moral argument, and again, I stress, I think the consumer-driven behaviour is what's challenging retailers and brands at the minute to go further and to invest. But I would stress the investment needs to be funded, and in making any business case work, we all have to play our part. So as long as we don't see a transference of the way in which we recycle today, but we are adding to that, in addition to that, that becomes quite a holistic, quite a transformational move for us in the first world.
What's happened since those days where you remember, I remember it, taking your Coke bottle or whatever bottle it was and getting the money back? Yeah. Since then, no such schemes have existed, and we've sort of seemed to have just gone on blithely regardless of all this. So where does the buck stop for that period of very bad behaviour?
I think in the UK we did get a little bit carried away with single-use plastics. I think that and in the USA too, we took the advantage of single-use. And that was prolific through the 80s, 90s and the consumer approach. But I think in Europe, just putting a wider context to this, you can see what happened in Germany, where they've had very successful outcomes over the last 10 years since 2003, where they changed their legislation, 90 to 99% recyclable. And in Norway and Scandinavia, of course, they've increasingly led the way in this. So it's doable. I think the UK...
Does that mean there's got to be one on every street corner?
Well, in terms of machines and devices, but I think innovation goes beyond just the soundbite of a machine on the corner. I'm very keen to make sure that our members don't get sort of caught up in that it's a machine at the end of the recycling, along with cardboard and other things. I think there is a more holistic piece to this, and I think the scheme should levy some increases in investment for our brands and retailers and for industry to increase capacity for recycling, but also the way in which our businesses take their investment strategy forward and deal with it in the boardroom.
It's very good of you to come in, Jonathan. Jonathan Ivelaw-Chapman from Sedex. Thank you very much.
Thanks.